The views and opinions expressed on the following program are those of the host and guests and do not necessarily represent those of any organization, including One Generation Away.
The freedom of a people to choose its leaders is the root of liberty.
Keep alive this experiment in liberty.
Liberty, in case you've forgotten, is the soul's right to breathe.
Government should be very minimal in protecting liberty.
Peace cannot be purchased at the cost of liberty.
The sturdy ground of liberty.
Liberty once lost is lost forever.
Fight for their liberty and for our security.
Guarantees individual liberty.
This great republic born alone in liberty.
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 Just how much do you want liberty?
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner,
a production of LibertyNation.com.
Cutting through the double talk, taking on the topics, going after what the politicians really mean, and making it all clear. For your freedom and your liberty. Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
The deed is done. Trump is impeached. But what happens now? Welcome back into Liberty Nation Radio, a production of LibertyNation.com and heard from coast to coast on the Radio America Network. The impeachment of President Trump, Nancy Pelosi's stall on sending it to the Senate, fallout from the scandalous Inspector General report on surveillance of the Trump campaign, another presidential debate. We'll get to all of it as we're joined in the analysis by LibertyNation.com political columnist Joe Schaefer, plus news on Obamacare and a new definition of firearms in our weekly discussion about threats and promising developments regarding your individual liberty with LibertyNation.com legal affairs editor Scott Cosenza.
Say what? Say what? Say what? One more time.
We commence the proceedings with our signature segment, Say What, where we roll out an assembly line of wacky, astonishing, damnable, and ultimately revealing things uttered by politicians and the chattering class. And we start with just the third impeachment of a president in American history and the first along strictly partisan lines. Every Democrat except 3 voting for, every Republican against. But it was followed by a massive disconnect. After claiming it was vital to rush through a partisan impeachment because Trump is an imminent threat to the Constitution and national security, Speaker Pelosi then refused to answer questions about impeachment from the media and threatened to not even send the impeachment to the Senate, knowing an exoneration of Trump is all but certain. And Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell pulled no punches on what he expects to happen once the process arrives in his upper chamber.
The Senate must put this right. We must rise to the occasion. There's only one outcome that is suited to the paucity of evidence, the failed inquiry, the slapdash case. Only one outcome suited to the fact that the accusations themselves are constitutionally incoherent. Only one outcome will preserve core precedents rather than smash them into bits in a fit of partisan rage because one party still cannot accept the American people's choice in 2016.
So, one way or another, Democrats have obviously squeezed every ounce of blood they're going to get from their impeachment crusade, but they're staring down the barrel of another gun at the same time. The IG report released last week from the Inspector General Michael Horowitz revealed almost unspeakable corruption at the highest levels of Barack Obama's FBI and their surveillance of the Trump presidential campaign, with a more comprehensive report from Attorney General William Barr to follow in the weeks or months ahead. And yet James Comey, the disgraced director of the FBI, actually went on TV and claimed exoneration, despite the Inspector General's remarks that it was the opposite.
Do you think this is vindication?
It is. I mean, the FBI's had to wait 2 years while the president and his followers lied about the institution. Finally, the truth gets told.
Does your report vindicate Mr. Comey?
it doesn't vindicate anyone at the FBI who touched this, including the leadership.
The FBI was accused of treason, of illegal spying, of tapping Mr. Trump's wires illegally, of opening an investigation without justification, of being a criminal conspiracy to defeat and then unseat a president. All of that was nonsense.
Isn't it remarkable how detached from reality and transparently corrupt you can become when you're a creature of the insular bubble known as the D.C. swamp? But Comey was hardly finished with his whoppers. Here are his comments last year on the warrant they tricked the FISA court into granting, followed by the Horowitz assessment, and then Comey explaining it away as sloppiness.
Total confidence that the FISA process was followed and that the entire case was handled in a thoughtful, responsible way by DOJ and the FBI.
We identified significant inaccuracies and omissions in each of the 4 applications. 7 in the first application, and a total of 17 by the final renewal application.
I was overconfident in the procedures that the FBI and Justice had built over 20 years. I thought they were robust enough. It's incredibly hard to get a FISA. I was overconfident in those because he's right. There was real sloppiness. 17 things that either should have been in the applications or at least discussed and characterized differently. It was not acceptable.
And Comey just kept on lying on how vital the phony Steele dossier funded by the Hillary Clinton campaign was to the FISA application.
My recollection was it was part of a broader mosaic of facts that were laid before the FISA judge to obtain a FISA warrant.
And we concluded that the Steele reporting played a central and essential role in the decision to seek a FISA order.
I'm not sure he and I are saying different things. What his report says is that the FBI thought it was a close call until they got the Steele report, put that additional information in, and that tipped it over to be probable cause. It's a long FISA application that includes Steele material and lots of other material. It was one part of the presentation to the court. It was not a huge part of the presentation to the court.
I'm not sure we're saying different things. Yeah, Horowitz said black, you say white, not very different. And he lied, Comey did, about how difficult it is to get a FISA warrant. They're granted like 99% of the time. But to show you how weak their case was for spying on the Trump campaign, their first FISA application was actually rejected. And then they came back with a fraudulent Steele dossier and got their warrant and 3 renewals. When an incumbent administration spies on its political enemies, it is, as Bill Barr has said, a big deal. And believe me, we have hardly heard the end of this. Meanwhile, though no one hardly noticed, 7 presidential candidates took the stage for the Democrats' 6th presidential debate Thursday night, and the guy with a target on his back was the latest frontrunner in the first contest in Iowa, young Pete Buttigieg, who was attacked by Elizabeth Warren for hosting a high-dollar fundraiser at a so-called wine cave in, where else? California.
Billionaires in wine caves should not pick the next president.
This is the problem with issuing purity tests you cannot yourself pass. Senator, your net worth is 100 times mine. If you want to talk about the capacity to win, try putting together a coalition to bring you back to office with 80% of the vote as a gay dude in Mike Pence's Indiana.
So there you go. An aggrieved candidate and the latest punching bag. And Mayor Pete turned the attack on the 3 senators on the stage and their committee meetings in D.C. and was met with a stinging put-down from Amy Klobuchar.
You basically mocked the 100 years of experience on the stage. And I have not denigrated your experience as a local official.
That is hilarious. The Senate is a great body. You don't hear me criticizing your record as a lowly local official. Translation, you're way too small for the job. Meanwhile, a comment made by Chris Wallace of Fox News has drawn a lot of fire lately. The anchor of Fox's signature program, Fox News Sunday, made a speech at the Newseum just 2 weeks before the shutdown of that Washington-based edifice of media self-glorification, apparently meaning to ingratiate himself to elite media which detests Fox News by making a declaration that not even the elite anchors have made.
I believe that President Trump is engaged in the most direct, sustained assault on freedom of the press in our history. He has done everything he can to undercut the media, to try to delegitimize us. And I think his purpose is clear, to raise doubts when we report critically about him and his administration that we can be trusted. Back in 2017, he tweeted something that said far more about him than it did about us. Quote, "The fake news media is not my enemy. It is the enemy of the American people."
Did Mr. Wallace even notice that Trump was attacking fake news, not the media, the press in general? But that distinction is lost on swamp rats who so desperately want to be embraced by the deranged anti-Trump media. You know what? I was around for the heyday of Chris's father, Mike Wallace, a real investigative journalist. And Chris, you're no Mike Wallace. Not even close. Quick break, and then we'll try to put the impeachment and presidential race into a year-end perspective, where we've been and where we're going in this nation divided like no time since the Civil War.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Where can you find honest political commentary with sobering analysis, accountability, deconstructing threats to our liberty, and boldly reporting the truth? Subscribe to the LibertyNation.com YouTube channel, where facts matter.
We believe that all men are entitled to blessings of liberty.
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
So the Democrats have completed their 3-year impeachment crusade and done the deed. They have impeached President Donald Trump on a straight party line vote, claiming an imminent threat to the Constitution and national security. But then Nancy Pelosi dodged questions about impeachment from the media and threatened to not even send the impeachment up to the Senate for a trial and verdict. Joining us to try and explain this seemingly inexplicable behavior by the nation's most powerful Democrat and assess the state of the Democrats' presidential race after another debate this week is LibertyNation.com political columnist Joe Schaefer. So, Joe, welcome. And no matter whether Pelosi finally, in the end, sends the articles of impeachment formally up to the Senate, just the publicity about her threat of holding her party's indictment makes it hard to figure how this is not an embarrassment for her. Why did she do it?
I mean, she's a political animal. This has been a political circus all along, and so we can only assume she sees political gain in doing this. It's certainly going to look horrible to the Democrats, and they've known this all along, as we've discussed, when it goes to the Senate and it immediately dissipates into nothing. So the more she extends this, the more they get to bask in their little moment of glory, their meaningless little moment of glory. I guess they see political advantage in that. Again, this is not about what's best for America. This is not about what's best for the American people. This is about what's best for the political interests of the Democratic Party.
Okay, so let's move on to the Senate. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell seemingly wants to either dismiss the indictment immediately or have a quick trial with few witnesses. But Trump wants something more like an inquisition with lots of witnesses, like Adam Schiff and Joe and Hunter Biden. which approach do you think would be more sound politically?
I think the former approach, to get it over with as quickly as possible. Trump loves the drama. He has a background in TV. He's good at that. But politically, it's not the right move. The right move is just to get this out of the way. He has an agenda that needs to be implemented. He's supposed to be a change president. He's not supposed to be wasting his time with these distractions. And the distraction is part of the political plan here to keep him from doing the things he wants to do. So let's just get it out of the way. It'll make the Democrats look worse. It's like they made this big mountain out of something that the Senate can just sweep away immediately, and we just go back to the way things were. It's going to make Nancy Pelosi and her friends look even smaller than they already do at the moment.
Now, Joe, Democrats, as we've discussed, knew they would face this Senate trial. They knew the worm would start to turn as it is now. With Republicans taking control of the gavel, they knew impeachment wasn't popular because there was no crime even alleged in the articles, and yet they did it anyway. Now, you and I have been saying for months now that impeachment would backfire, but is where we stand right now better or worse for the Democrats than you predicted?
Well, I think it's worse only because, like you said, we've been talking about this for a long time, and they've wasted all these months. So now we're all these months closer to the 2020 presidential election, and it's turned out just like we thought. This is not going to be a great thing for them. This is going to make them look bad. They've learned nothing along the way, absolutely nothing from this whole political process. I thought them booing Steve Scalise when he brought up the pretty simple fact that 63 million Americans voted for this man. It's almost like they never considered that fact, that 63 million Americans would not be happy with them doing this. They live in a bubble. They live in a fantasy world. And the fact that we're so much further down the road now, so much closer to 2020, right around the corner, that's what makes it worse for them. They've wasted all this time, and they're not going to get anything useful out of it.
So, Joe, unbeknownst to most of America, Democrats held another presidential debate, their sixth, on Thursday night, with something of a beatdown on the young frontrunner in the Iowa caucuses, Pete Buttigieg, highlighting the festivities. Did any of the candidates do anything to distinguish themselves or break the logjam at the top of that field?
Yeah, Buttigieg had a lot of the attention, a lot of the sniping at him, but I really didn't think the things they talked about with him were that important. I think the one person who really stood out in a negative way was Bernie Sanders. I thought he bombed last night. He was completely terrible.
Well, Joe, now that the calendar's about to turn to 2020, regular workaday Americans will begin paying more serious attention to this presidential race. They'll ultimately have to decide between Trump or not Trump. Now, the economy's roaring. There's more jobs than people to fill them. But is the president's style, his divisiveness, and his stream of indiscreet remarks, like a really unfortunate joke that he told about the late Congressman John Dingell at a rally a couple of days ago, is all of that enough to lead voters to turn him out of office?
I mean, we got this answer in 2016. It's not even close. If you want to say this Dingell comment was, ill-timed, whatever, I thought it was just a bad joke that didn't work, nothing more. He said much worse than that in 2016, and we know that, and he got elected anyway.
Okay, Joe, thanks so much. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Joe Schaefer, political columnist for LibertyNation.com. We'll break away and come back to talk with one of the key architects of the Trump economic policies, Stephen Moore.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Far more important than my political future and far more important than yours, the well-being of our country.
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
The only good thing about Trump is all his policies. Those are the words of the Wall Street Journal, quoted by the authors of the new book, Trumponomics, which speaks to what really has been the underlying story of the Trump presidency. Easily the most significant accomplishment, the signature of this president, an economy firing on all cylinders, joblessness at historic lows, deregulation unleashing entrepreneurial energy and capital across the land. So, while the elite media wants to make the president's impeachment the story of the year, in reality, the story of the year is the same as the story of the last 2 years, Trumponomics. And it is Trump's hoped-for elixir for attracting those 2020 voters who don't love the man but do love his policies. And the co-author of Trumponomics, my old friend Stephen Moore, economic advisor to the Trump campaign, founder of the vaunted Club for Growth, Heritage Foundation economist, and key architect of the Trump economic policies, joins us now to discuss the results of policies he advocated for with Donald Trump from the time he was a candidate, and which have now become the cornerstone of his re-election campaign. And we'll also talk about what to expect on the economic front in the year ahead. Stephen Moore, welcome back to Liberty Nation.
Hi, Tim. By the way, I can't really improve on that. I mean, you did a really nice job of summarizing, what the big issues are for Trump and I think why he will win not just a re-election, but maybe possibly a landslide re-election, given how strong everything is going in terms of economy, jobs, low interest rates, low inflation, and it's just hard to find much to complain about with this booming economy.
Well, I went on record. I think it was the first Washington-based columnist who wrote up on LibertyNation.com the prediction back in July, 2 days after July 4th, that Trump would win 350 electoral votes. So, and you know what? Even in the impeachment and everything that's happened since, my mind hasn't been changed at all. But let me ask you this: with Trumponomics,
well, mine has been. My mind has been changed. I'm actually, more bullish than ever. I'm. You say 350 votes. I'm saying it somewhat differently. 40 states, which would be, picking up states like, Nevada, New Hampshire, New Mexico, Minnesota, and then the Democrats are just stuck with the very, very blue states like Connecticut and Illinois and New York and California. But, people don't vote against prosperity, or they very rarely do. And, now that you've got the Democrats, I think the odds of Trump's reelection have gone up significantly just in the last week and just in the last 48, 72 hours with this impeachment vote. I think it was a catastrophically bad decision by the Democrats. It's only energized Republicans. It's only unified us. Because we know who the enemy is, these people who just insanely hate Trump. And so we'll see. But if the economy remains strong like this, Trump is in very good shape.
Well, strictly from the standpoint of political analysis rather than partisanship one way or the other, I don't disagree with anything you've said. And I've felt for a long time that, the end result of this, it wasn't hard to see for the media that could, the few of them that could see past the nose on their faces, that the end result of this impeachment was going to be no Republicans voting and handing it over to the Senate controlled by Mitch McConnell. But let's get to the meat of the matter here, which is Trumponomics. It's the story of the year. It's the story of his presidency. It's likely to get him reelected. So have you taken or scheduled a victory lap over the state of the economy you had such a hand in helping to shape?
Well, first of all, thank you very much. And Donald Trump, he knew what he wanted to do, and it was fun working with him and putting a little bit of meat on the bones. But boy, this guy, he has the right inclination. And, people always ask me, what's the most important thing that's happened, in terms of why the economy is so much better today than it was 4 years ago. And it's not too complicated. We replaced a community organizer with a businessman, someone who actually knows something about how to create jobs and how to meet a payroll and how to create a business and make it successful. And, look, government isn't business, but, you bring some of those principles in. And what Trump has really shown, I think, once again, just as Reagan did, is if you just get government out of the way. That's all you have to do. Just get the government out of the way. The 27 million men and women who are the heroes of the economy, who are the ones who start small businesses, they will do their thing, and they will do it better than anybody in the world. and you'll have jobs, you'll have rising incomes, you'll have prosperity, and that's what we've got today.
Now, your book, Trumponomics, provides a sharp contrast between the economic policies of the two most recent presidents, Obamonomics versus Trumponomics, if you will, outlining the key differences between the economic philosophies of the two and the results. So how would you best characterize the difference in outcomes between Obama's 8 years and Trump's 3 years, taking into account that Obama did take over immediately following the Great Recession of 2008, while Trump came to office with an economy that was flat but stable?
Well, the president loves to use this number that I uncovered and reported in the Wall Street Journal about a month ago or so, which found that I just looked at average middle income incomes for, which is basically wages and salaries for people. I'm not talking about Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and, Tom Brady. I'm talking about, people who are in the exact middle, median incomes. And what I found was that under Obama, starting from when the recession ended, so not counting the end of the Bush recession, incomes went up about $1,100 for middle-class families in that 7-year period. Under Trump, in just 3 years, middle-class incomes have gone up $5,250. I mean, that's incredible, isn't it, when you think about it?
That's the answer to the question right there, rising wages, because people, they need a job, and there's a lot more of them, and then they need to make more money, and there's more of that. It's about that.
And I always laugh, Tim, because, when I give speeches or, talk to people about, they're oftentimes they're Obama people, and they'll say, okay, yeah, the economy's doing great, but this is just a continuation of the Obama economy. And I'm like, oh, what are you talking about? I mean, Trump has actually repealed and reversed everything Obama did.
Nice try.
So how could this be?
Yeah,
and when you see the big acceleration, it's just, and by the way, these are the same people, the ones who are saying this is just a continuation of the Obama economy are the same people who said if Donald Trump is elected president, he's going to cause a second Great Depression. This is not a second Great Depression. We're not even going to remember the recession talk, Tim, 3 or 4 months ago. A recession's right around the corner.
So
the economy's picking up speed.
I take it that you don't share the view of Paul Krugman the day after the election that the world economy would collapse and never recover from it.
Never recover, right? Yeah.
Now
now they say it's just Obama, so we'll see what people believe.
Now, we heard from Trump that 3% economic growth would become the norm in his presidency. He said that during the campaign. Now, we had that for a while, but now we're closer to 2%. What's a realistic expectation for economic growth in 2020?
I think it's going to be closer to 3%. And, the odds of 3% went way up when he got this China trade deal done, which is a big victory for Trump. It's a big victory for American workers and manufacturers and farmers. And just having that tariff war in a state of a kind of truce is a very positive thing for the economy. So I'm going to say we get close to 3%, which is hard because, we've got virtually every single American looking for a job in a job. We have 7 million unfilled jobs today. The big problem right now is finding workers to fill with the skills and the desire to do these jobs. So that's a little bit of a restraint on growth. But, I still think we can get back on the 3% growth path, and I think we can continue to produce, 150,000 new jobs a month, and I think we can see continued gains in wages. And, I just don't see anything right now on the horizon that would really bust up this economy.
Nobody does economics better, Stephen. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you, Tim. Merry Christmas.
That is Stephen Moore, key architect of Trumponomics. And when we cross over into the new year, we'll have him back to look at the year ahead. We'll break away for a moment and then come back with Talkin' Liberty.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
And now we welcome you into the ultimate segment of Liberty Nation Radio, which we entitled Talkin' Liberty, as we welcome back in. Ready for the big build-up? Our guardian of individual liberty, LibertyNation.com, legal affairs editor, constitutional lawyer, Scott Cosenza. If you can't shine after that introduction, you never will.
It's like Christmas came early, Tim. Hello, and thank you.
Thank you again for coming back. Now, Obamacare is a law that they're trying to dismantle piece by piece in this sort of patchwork of things that are legal and others that no longer are. And it turns out that the Obamacare insurance mandate has been now struck down by a federal appeals court. How important is this?
Well, I know it's like catnip for you, Tim, which is why I put it at number one. It probably is not the most significant decision in the Obamacare litigation. But what happened was last year, a federal judge in Texas ruled that because the individual the price or fine of failure to comply with the individual mandate was zero, then it couldn't be said to be a tax. That was how the Supreme Court had justified allowing the mandate to exist. Roberts called it a tax, and therefore it was legal. So then the question became, well, if there's no tax, then it can't be legal. Then the mandate can exist. And and that's what the judge said. Well, we just had a ruling now from the Circuit Court of Appeals, which overruled that particular part of the judge's order. And what I mean by that, Tim, is the judge said because there's not a valid tax here, the entirety of the Obamacare law has to fail because there's no justification for it. What the appellate court has said to that judge is, go back and have another look at that. We're not saying that the individual mandate is legal, and in fact, it's not. That's what the 2-1 decision, two Republican-appointed justices, one George W. Bush, one Donald Trump judge, I said justice, they're appellate court judges, and one dissenting Jimmy Carter appointee, have said the mandate is not okay. It is unconstitutional. But in contravention to the last year's ruling, we're not ready to say that means the entirety of the law needs to be thrown out. This
is what keeps happening.
Yeah.
Right, that they want that the anti-Obamacare forces want the whole law tossed out because it hangs on the individual mandate, where the pro-Obamacare people are saying, well, the basic structure of the program is going to remain in place no matter what. Now, let me ask you this question.
It's called severability, by the way. That's the legal issue involved in this case.
Right. And we've heard about severability ever since Obamacare got passed. To what extent, as John Roberts did, is the Supreme Court entitled to reassign a category of revenue collected by the government? In other words, it was not called a tax, and then John Roberts decided to recategorize it as a tax. How is that something within the purview of the Supreme Court of the United States?
Tim, it's been a while since I read the U.S. Constitution from start to finish, but I can assure you the last time I did read it, I did not find justification for that kind of ruling within the document.
To say the least. All right, you're such a master of understatement, Scott. Now let's go to your favorite state. We all know what that is. Pennsylvania. You always find a story, not that they're not legitimate, but the Pennsylvania Attorney General unilaterally changes the definition of a firearm and tells the state police to treat parts of firearms as firearms.
It just so happens that the two states I have most familiarity with, Pennsylvania and Virginia, and their gun laws are popping off right now. Yes. We had the Sanctuary City movement, which is ongoing in Virginia, and the Pennsylvania Attorney General Josh Shapiro, Tim, jumped into the fray in a massive blow against gun rights by unilaterally declaring that firearm parts, which is to say parts which could not be assembled into a firearm absent tooling and know-how and other things, are to be considered firearms. I think that it is a staggering, really a breathtaking power grab, an unconstitutional one that will really impact the lives of Pennsylvanians in a very bad way. The few who will get caught up. I'm not suggesting this is an item that most people are concerned with, firearm parts. But for the ones that do, they were operating legally last week, and now they're supposedly felons, according to the AG.
So this is the camel's nose pushing a little bit further under the tent. Now, let me ask you this.
A full hump.
Because they can't get full-on gun control laws, so they're trying these end runs with little elements of guns and their parts. next question is, how then are parts of a gun to be treated differently than, say, ammunition?
Well, the ammunition cannot be converted to actually fire ammunition, is presumably the distinction there, whereas the part could be. These are about...
But isn't that what I'm sort of heading towards is, isn't that the next step to say that if you have ammo, then that shows intent to use a gun, which... For somebody who has power and is motivated to use those levers of power to restrict rights absent justification, then yes, Tim, ammunition, any manner of restriction can and will come down the pike. Okay, Scott, switching gears to New Jersey, where lawmakers, my favorite phrase for politicians, pass marijuana referendum for the 2020 ballot, as New Jersey could become about the 10th state in the country to legalize recreational marijuana. Will that be for both use and sale?
Let's steer away from recreational and say non-prescription use, or treat marijuana like alcohol, I think is a better way to put it. And yes, this is a real profile in courage, Tim. The New Jersey legislature couldn't go ahead and pass the law themselves. But I think every state now that will have, presuming that New Jersey goes, that will have laws that treat marijuana like alcohol, have done so by citizen referendum. The politicians of that state did not have the courage to change the law and reverse course on the drug law. The citizens did, and I'm confident that the citizens of New Jersey will likely follow the citizens of so many other states when given the choice and turn away from prohibition.
I'm sure that the decision to put marijuana on the ballot in 2020 has nothing to do with the politicians' thirst for tax revenue in a very responsible fiscal state like New Jersey.
The story reporting this says that it's a $200 to $300 million revenue stream, likely, depending on the actual rate imposed. There will be, some taxes imposed on the sale. So they can't keep their to deny themselves an income stream is antithetical, of course, to the politician.
They're not going to do that. But that's the tax, basically, on marijuana users for being able to simply be left alone by the government like people that use alcohol. Okay. The feds have been reaping data from 1,500 phones in the largest reported reverse location warrant. I don't know exactly the details of this story, but it sounds scary.
Well, it is very scary, Tim, because one of the hallmarks of a kind of what we would consider to be a proper warrant procedure is that specificity is involved in terms of what are you looking for and the probable cause to justify that warrant. And what we have here is the exact and metaphysical opposite of specificity. They know a certain crime was committed in a certain place. That's all they know. They don't know that the perpetrator of that crime even owned a cellular phone or an electronic device. But what they've decided, Tim, is to just dragnet all the data from that area and then sort of reverse engineer. Well, we know if there was an arson in this place, and then in the other place we can cross-reference. And no one has ever said, Tim, that eliminating all privacy won't be a boon to law enforcement efficiency. It certainly will. The problem is the penalty when it comes to our privacy and our data. And there were 1,500 people's data that were reported on this warrant. So at least 1,499 have had their privacy violated.
On that note, thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Tim.
This program, Liberty Nation Radio and LibertyNation.com's own podcasts, The Uprising, hosted by Scott, with generous appearances by yours truly, and The Rabbit Hole, Politics and Prose, where past is prologue. All of them available on demand anytime, anywhere at LibertyNation.com. So that is it for this week, but we'll be back at you next week for our special year-end program. Until then, this is Tim Donner saying, stand up for liberty. And we'll see you next time on Liberty Nation Radio.